HIV LPFM in New Orleans. We are Radio Null HIV with programming. That's right. Programming dedicated to human rights and social justice, WHIVFM.org. We honor independent voices. We are not a radio station with a mission. Nope, we are a mission with a radio station, and that is to end all wars. Welcome to COVID NoiseFilter, the daily hour-long show. It is a pleasure to have you on board with us, whether you are streaming live on the interwebs with us on YouTube or Facebook, or whether you are listening in your car or on your drive or on a walk or as a podcast through WHIV. It's great to be here, and we are so happy that you are here. If you are watching through any of the internet type of devices, please share this link, please like, please ring the bells and do the thumbs ups and all this stuff so that other people know that we are here doing this show. Today, I think Doc Griggs may be joining us a little bit later, if at all. So I may be solo on this show. So obviously, any of your comments are always greatly appreciated. As always, good morning to Tamika, who's tuning in from Japan right now. And it is morning there, so thank you all for tuning in. And given that I am solo today, I'm going to just jump right into the stories right now, and hopefully we are joined by Doc Griggs. It looks like we will probably also have another guest with us as well. So let me send him an invite. So hopefully, I don't know if we're getting Esmeralda or we're going to get Dave Roston, but let's see as we get started here. So again, thank you all for tuning in. I know it's been a couple days since we've been here, but it's a pleasure to be back. And I think we're going to be able to do all three. We'll be able to do all 3 days, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday this week, barring any emergencies or issues that are going to come up. So with that, let's go ahead and just jump right into it, and let's get started. As we know, the G7 is currently meeting right now. So this is a summit of the world's wealthier democracies. And the UK will use that occasion to urge world leaders to commit to vaccinating the world by the end of 2022. Britain pledged in February to give most of its surplus supply to COVAX, the UN-backed program to vaccinate 4 countries. One thing that we have talked a lot about was and has been COVAX and the importance of getting as many people vaccinated around the globe all at once. It doesn't really help if we vaccinate pockets of people here, pockets of people here, pockets of people here, pockets of people. We need to get everybody vaccinated at the same time. And the reason for that is that we're going to see emergence of variants. And the problem with that is that once we have emergence of variants, what could potentially be problematic is that we will see variants that will emerge that will be vaccine resistant. And that's what we don't want to happen. So this is why we have to vaccinate everybody at once. So we have seen some commitment from some of the wealthier countries to start vaccinating other countries, but we're not seeing it fast enough, to be quite frank. And to be honest, while the effort is good, it's not good enough. And so we need more, we need better, and we need faster. So real quick, let me just answer a couple questions here. Or comments. Had a all-vaxxed party Saturday outdoors, even in the rain. Nice to feel a little normal. Yes, it does feel great when everybody is vaccinated for people to be gathering and joining one another. So I'm super happy to hear that. And then also, Elizabeth says 3 friends in the UK and 1 in Madrid just got vaccinated in the last 2 days. That's great. Yeah. I've been hearing stories about people traveling to Europe for work or what have you, and apparently the Europeans have not been vaccinated yet. I don't know why I'm surprised. Of course, we hoarded a lot of the vaccines, and while it's good that we all are vaccinated here in the U.S., we have access to lots of great vaccines here in the U.S. Again, it's super important that we vaccinate the globe. So this is some progress from G7. That's positive progress, and I'm happy to hear that. So let's see. There might be a new kind of COVID-19 vaccine as soon as the summer. It's based on known technology. Doesn't require special refrigeration. What makes it different to the current vaccine, it delivers genetic instructions for the spike proteins. Then our bodies have to make that protein. The vaccine contains the spike protein itself, so it's already made, plus something that enhances the immune system's So that's great. Right now, the mRNA vaccines, as well as adenoviral vaccines, but they've been somewhat problematic. So let's focus on the mRNA vaccines. And obviously, I'm a huge fan of the mRNA vaccines. Dr. Griggs and I made an animation about the mRNA vaccines. But focusing on the mRNA vaccines, it's important for us to recognize how it works, right? So the vaccines deliver a small part of a genetic code. The virus itself is RNA, but as humans, we are made of DNA. So what RNA is basically, it allows, because our body, all the instructions for the body's existence, for a cell's existence, are kept in our double helix in the genome. And because the genome can't itself take a piece off of it and then go into the ribosome, which is the body's 3D printer, and reads that reads that code, you have to make a copy of it, right? It's just like, what's the analogy of it? It's like, if you look at a beautiful painting that's in a museum, let's say you go to the Louvre and you want to look at the Mona Lisa, right? This is not a great example, but you understand what I'm getting at. The painting is there, and you want to look at the painting again, right? So you got to take a picture of it. I know you're not supposed to do that. You take a picture of it, or you go and you make copies of it, or you go online and look at copies of it, or what have you. That's essentially what mRNA is. It's a copy of a very, very specific part of your DNA, but it's been flipped into RNA instructions. RNA, mRNA, and RNA and DNA are basically very close cousins, very, very related. So anyway, these vaccines have been incredibly successful, and they, I hope, will continue to be successful, and we'll continue to use them. So the idea of bringing in some new technology is always interesting, and while I'm a little hesitant with this new technology, of course, let's see what the science says. Let's see what the data says. Let's see if these new vaccines are good. But I hope and I wish that everybody were to get the mRNA vaccines. All right, so we finally bring you good news out of India. Daily cases yesterday dropped to the lowest level seen in over 2 months. It's a welcome turnaround after a brutal second wave. Cases peaked May 9th, may have dropped over 68%, plus 66% of new cases in just 5 states is an indication the transmission has been contained to a localized area. So I'll comment on that in a moment. Let me welcome to the show David Roston, who is a very, very good friend. Dave Roston and I have been working together pretty much throughout the pandemic. He's the person that's working in the back. David also was the star producer for the animations, and as we move forward, animations as we are moving forward as well. And because Doc Griggs had a last-minute emergency, I asked if David wanted to jump on, and he graciously accepted in very, very short time. So thank you for jumping on, David.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, beautiful. Wonderful to be on the show.
That's awesome. You have
kind of a bit on the show.
An entity of yours has been on the show, and actually, let me ask you this. So, of course, David, we were talking about Esmeralda. For those of you that remember, when Esmeralda was on, she made quite an appearance and quite an impression. But Dave, you sent me a video. What were you doing with that video? And I wonder if we could play it here.
Which one are you talking about? Send you a lot of stuff.
You sent me the video of Esmeralda going to Hollywood.
Oh, going to Hollywood? Might be hard to pull up, but maybe we try at the end of the show. But I do, so for people to understand, I am a public health communicator, as MarkAlain and Doc Griggs are. I also work with puppets and puppetry to convey messaging. And one of my characters' name is Esmeralda, and she's been on the podcast with Doc Griggs and MarkAlain. She looks and sounds a little differently than I do, but different demeanor. But it's nice to be back on the show.
Absolutely. What was the Esmeralda going to Hollywood? What was that about?
Oh, well, I recently moved back to Los Angeles from California, from New Orleans, and Esmeralda, being a New Orleans celebrity, needs to make the transition with me out to Hollywood and follow her dreams. And so we're exploring different ways to do some public health messaging, perhaps around mental health, behavioral health, through puppets. And
Right, and
so,
maybe even a alcohol use disorder or.
yeah, substance abuse, addressing certain things. And so, yeah, potentially with COVID, she came on the show before talking about COVID and how, her metaphor for talking about vaccines is that if your body is like a bar and COVID isn't allowed in the bar, antibodies created from vaccines are like the bouncers trying to keep out COVID who's not allowed in the bar. And so that's the way that she likes to think about the world.
Awesome. And we have 3 more videos coming up. We're making. Oh, we got one more. Yeah, guys, we have another video that we're just waiting for approval. That's going to be the booster and the booster videos. So we'll definitely be rolling that out here for you guys very, very soon. And I actually did talk to Michelle today, by the way, and the project officer was out on leave all last week. So
yeah, just as a heads up, that we've been making these animations around COVID vaccines and how they work, and the second video is going to focus on variants and using fairy tales as a metaphor to discuss variants and how eventually, we who are vaccinated are going to need a booster shot as COVID continues to mutate, and our antibodies will have trouble recognizing new variants. And we're starting to see that with, new variants emerging in India and beyond. I saw you just talking about that as I jumped on the show. And that this, virus is not going away. It might be a little bit stalled around here, but just because we're vaccinated here doesn't mean that the pandemic is not raging around the world and that it has more opportunities to evolve. And we are going to face the effects of that eventually. And so, it's interesting. I'm hearing a lot of people saying like, oh, during the pandemic, we used to do this and now we don't. And, pandemic is just an epidemic around the world. And just because it's not here right in our backyards right now or in our front yards doesn't mean that our neighbors to the north or south, east or west are not dealing with the reality still, that this virus is still spreading throughout their communities. So, it might be stalled here. It was stalled, it was certain countries had.
In India.
Sorry, yeah, in India.
Even what happened in India.
Mm-hmm. And in India, and while the pandemic was raging here, there were festivals going on around the world, and this virus moves, and we adjust to it in different ways as a society. And so,
or as our good friend Doc Riggs would say in the video, viruses are smart.
Viruses are smart, and they mutate. Yeah. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for the next NoiseFilter animation video, which will cover variants and explaining it in a way that I think the layperson can understand, and it's quite fun. And we have 3 more videos after that are focusing on HIV medications and how different HIV medications work, and that's super exciting too. And it's just amazing to be a part of this medium, this new medium for us. Whether it's it's a radio, podcast, a live stream, and now video animation. I feel like one thing that you and I, MarkAlain, share an interest for is just creative ways of explaining difficult health topics to folks and doing it in a way that is engaging and creative and easy to understand. And so, yeah, the future is exciting for NoiseFilter.
Yeah, and we're going to be rolling out a new NoiseFilter website here fairly soon as well. So lots of great stuff happening with NoiseFilter, and we're super excited about it. But just real quickly, let me just kind of get through some more stories here. I was really kind of unhappy to hear and see this news. Royal Caribbean is now changing their mind. We know that the cruise industry was making a very big point of making sure that everybody who comes back onto the cruise ships are going to be vaccinated. You'll remember that one of the main outbreaks, one of the first outbreaks or cluster of cases happened on I think the Princess Diamond or the Diamond Princess, where the rates were incredibly. That was to me. Did you mean to send that to me?
Oh no, I meant to send it to someone else. Sorry.
The Princess Diamond was the first cluster of cases. So now that the cruise industry has gotten the go ahead to actually come back and start doing cruises again, they were doing it with the idea that everybody needed to be vaccinated. So what happened in Florida, which is of course one of the main places by which cruises launch out of or take off from, is that Ron DeSantis, the governor of and we've seen these laws all throughout the South, preempted the ability by passing laws and signing into law the notion that businesses can't require vaccine passports, essentially, for a lack of a better word. And again, hypocrisy knows no bounds, when it comes to politicians. So these are the first folks that'll tell you, big government, stay out of, let businesses just run themselves. But nope, that's not what we have here. Big government is here. I am a big fan of government. I think government works, but this is when government works against you. So the Royal Caribbean says it won't require U.S. passengers to get vaccinated. So now they're reversing their notion to go on several ships set to sail out of Florida. They'll just strongly encourage it. And the unvaccinated may have to forego testing and follow some restrictions. Florida's governor threatened to fine cruise lines $5,000 each time they required a guest to show proof of vaccination. And what do you think about that? I mean, that just to me just seems just so obscene,
it seems very irresponsible, and I think if we're really trying to protect our citizens, this is something that goes completely backwards to what is best for making sure that everyone that goes on that cruise ship is safe, right? And there's also a lot of people that are not able to get vaccinated because they may be immunocompromised or have certain health conditions that they can't, or maybe they're very young, and so it was a hotbed for COVID transmission early on, and we saw that as people trapped essentially on cruise ships, and especially as we're talking, we kind of hinted at it but that this is a global pandemic, and that especially with travel and a lot of people getting on and off boats, you're going to be more exposed to situations in an international way, potentially hitting multiple countries or multiple places. That would be even a higher risk for contracting that.
Absolutely. And, and again, I grew up at a time when we were told that businesses should be allowed to be able to govern themselves. And it's just, again, the hypocrisy and the irony of it's constantly, government is big when it goes against GOP principles, and it's small when it supports GOP principles. And there's just no consistency in this country. We need to actually have some consistency of thought and government, and that's what good governance is. And this just really frustrates me. If they always did this in one direction, they should always do it in the other direction. That's not what we're seeing. And to me, that's frustrating. The hypocrisy of government frustrates me.
Absolutely.
All right. So the United States sends its first shipments of surplus vaccines abroad today, 80 million doses by the end of June to start with, 75% of those, 75% of the first 25 million doses will be allotted through COVAX, the international distribution system. So what this is saying here is that we've got surplus vaccine. It's not saying what kind of vaccine. Oh, even Johnson & Johnson, no, it's one shot. So basically we have 80 million doses. Even if it's mRNA vaccines, that really comes down to 40 million. We have 7.6 billion people in the world. So we definitely need as many vaccines as we can out there. Getting it out through COVAX is good because, of course, COVAX is making vaccines free of charge for low-income countries, and so resource-poor countries. And I think that's really important.
I have a question about that. So one of the issues with mRNA vaccines is storage and distribution in terms of having it to be very cold, right? And as we're getting into resource-poor countries where refrigeration and having freezers has been difficult in mRNA vaccines. That's why maybe these more traditional vaccines like the J&J and AstraZeneca may be more logistical there. So how do you then deliver those vaccines that are maybe more sensitive to heat in some resource-poor countries that face problems with those vaccines? And then would it make more sense that getting to those harder to reach, maybe rural areas and low-income countries would be more optimal for them to go with the J&J, for example?
Absolutely, there's no question that certainly what you're referring to is something called the cold chain. And addressing a cold chain is incredibly important, and making sure that you have the cold chain intact is really, really important. Now, would it be better to have a vaccine that doesn't need a cold chain? Absolutely, of course, because a cold chain it's like a link in a chain. Wherever the weak link is, the whole chain is broken as a result of that. So it's the same thing with these mRNA vaccines. So as you mentioned, I think Johnson & Johnson, I think the AstraZeneca vaccines don't require a cold chain. They do. I think AstraZeneca requires 2 doses. So it's still somewhat not ideal because in especially rural parts of the world, you may just have one chance to vaccinate somebody. But that being said, I will say this, and of course it's a little bit different because it's the nature of the disease. But when Ebola infections strike rural parts of the world, they're able, the best way to deal with Ebola is through vaccination, right? You vaccinate people immediately. That vaccine needs to be kept to like minus 70 degrees as well. So, it is possible to get vaccines that are cold to rural parts of the world. That is possible to do. Is it ideal? No. Do we want to, is that the best thing for us to do? No, it's not. But is it possible? Yes, it is possible to do. But your point is well taken, and there are other vaccine options as well. But the point is that we are starting to see countries starting to shift and starting to move their surplus vaccines over. Now, I think another thing that they're doing is that there's just not enough people wanting to get vaccinated anymore, and they're probably dealing with expiration dates that are coming up as well. So they're probably offloading these vaccines, all of a sudden refer to them as surplus, and then just moving them over into other parts of the world. But listen, it's still a thing. I'll still take it, right? Like, it's still important that people are out there getting vaccinated. So that's the good news there.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of people had an issue with America not exporting some of these vaccines earlier, in the sense of hoarding a lot of these vaccines and making sure that this American, residents are vaccinated first, and you make it, before exporting, where we have massive breakouts around the world. But like you said, it's as long as people are getting vaccinated, this is like the most important thing, whether it's here or if it's anywhere else. If we have the means to do it, we should be doing it.
We should be doing it like chop ASAP, right? I got this next story is for Dave Roston, who is in California right now. As we heard, California will fully reopen in less than 2 weeks and do away with almost all masks and social distancing requirements for the vaccinated. But California OSHA board is now considering new workplace rules that even vaccinated employees must remain masked unless everyone in the workplace is inoculated. The California Chamber of Commerce is not pleased. Dave, were you aware of this, and what are your thoughts about that?
I did not know about that, but it's interesting as I start to talk to folks here in California about masks and what is going to be required, and if people are just going to continue to do them on their own, just out of habit, you know, that they want to protect themselves and others. It's almost become just part of, just customary at this point to wear a mask. And I think a lot of folks in California, more liberal population, you know, we are masking up a lot. You see that here in Los Angeles. People out on the street are masked up. People around, there's still a lot of masking going on. That's a big question mark. You know, in 8 days when they lift that order, and a lot of stuff will be open without a capacity, you know, without limiting public spaces and concert venues and things like that. It's going to be quite interesting. I was not familiar with that small OSHA detail that you brought up. But again, it's going to be interesting to, it kind of flirts that line of asking people for proof of, you know, vaccination. Right. So, and, you know, if that's infringing on people's civil liberties and stuff like that, and, you know,
it's not. The laws are clear about that. Yeah, laws are clear about that.
So can you pull that story up again? Just curious to see it because I haven't seen that before. Unless everyone in the workplace is inoculated. Yeah, I mean that's one way to.
That's exactly
people
right.
to make sure that people get vaccinated. That's for sure.
That's exactly right. So a new drug treatment, real quickly, molnupiravir. They do not come with pronunciations. Molnupiravir is a new antiviral treatment that looks like it's ending the end of a clinical trial. So we will keep you guys updated on that. This is an interesting story. As a result of lockdowns and working from home, you would think that U.S. traffic deaths would have dropped tremendously. Actually, it rose by 7%, the largest increase in 13 years. The agency, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, says that it's because drivers are taking more risk because the roads were less congested. That's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also still has to do with texting and driving. I feel like that's always a factor, and I feel like as we're getting more and more attached to our phones, you know, that's still an issue. Why it's rising, I'm not exactly sure.
Voice to text. That's what you should do.
There you go. There you go.
If you ever get a text from me that's all like, what is all this? That's probably voice to text.
There you go. Or just wait, you know, just wait.
Just wait. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to a couple stories here. Yep, we're going to go over this story in detail. The U.S. South may see a COVID surge this summer as vaccination rates lag. We're definitely going to be going over that largely because Ed Torpedo, who is a colleague and somebody I admire greatly, he's quoted. He is the LSU Dean of Research, and I worked with him all year long as well. New York's businesses can choose to end after remaining limits after 70% of adults have gotten at least one shot, the governor says. So, you know, again, I like the idea of tying opening to vaccines. I think that's what, you know, dropping the mask mandate should have been with the CDC.
When it says adults there, who are they referring to?
I'm sure over 18-year-olds.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see, we got Uganda has a recent wave that's sickening younger people, suggesting a possible variant. A secret to the alpha variant's success, a new study shows. I actually been meaning to read that one, so I don't have that one here. Despite vaccine success, the new variant is menacing the UK, and I think that's the alpha variant here. So let's read This story here about what's going on in the U.S. South. Experts are concerned that states across the U.S. South where vaccination rates are lagging could face a surge in coronaviruses over the summer. A dozen states, many of them in the Northeast, Maine, Massachusetts, Connecticut, have already reached a benchmark of at least 70% adults with at least one vaccine dose, a goal that President Biden has set for July 4th. But in the South, that marker is nowhere in sight for several states. In 15 states, Arkansas, the Carolinas, Georgia, and Louisiana, about half of it or fewer have received a dose, according to the New York Times. In 2 states, Alabama and Mississippi, it would take a year to get to one dose, to 70% of the population. Public health experts and officials in states with lower vaccination rates say the president's benchmark will help reduce cases and deaths, but it's somewhat arbitrary. I don't think it's arbitrary. I think It was pretty clear. Even if 70% of adults are vaccinated, the virus and its more contagious variants are spreading. But we do know that. They remain concerned that the residents are more susceptible to infection as restrictions are starting to ease across the country. And if there is a summer surge across the South, experts believe it won't be as grave as last year's, of course. Now, here's where Dr. Trapito comes in. But memories of last summer when cases rose quickly after some southern states are rushed to open are still fresh. Younger people are less likely to be vaccinated, will be the most vulnerable during any surge, said Dr. Edward Trapito, an epidemiologist and associate dean for research at the Louisiana State University School of Public Health. While death or severe illness is not as common for young people with COVID, it is still possible. The surge is not likely to end up tying up hospitals and causing deaths. There are certain populations that are undervaccinated, and that's where we see a rise. We know that. To avoid the summer surge, states across the South need to catch up with the Northeast. We know that. We're just not even close to that in the southern states. Mississippi, for example, the country's lowest vaccination rate, with 34% of the population have received at least one shot. Governor Reeves of Mississippi said Sunday that despite the low vaccination numbers, case numbers indicated the risk of contracting COVID-19 in the state was low. BS. That is so not true. That is so not true. Just last week, I showed you guys that people who are unvaccinated have the same rates of contraction of virus that at the peak of the epidemic in January. Another worry is testing. Dr. Trapito said a decline in testing would make it difficult to contain outbreaks. The number of tests are down. Why don't so many people? We don't have so many people rushing for testing because all the messaging is about vaccines. It's important to remind people that if you're concerned, it is worth getting tested. And then Dr. Cantor weighs in, says even statewide figures that appear promising can gloss over local problems. Dr. Joseph Cantor, the top health official in Louisiana, said in mid-May. So anyway, what are your and look at this. These are states. Look at this graph. These are states, and you can see where they're missing the goal, at least to have at least one vaccine dose. So states are not getting close to where they need to be.
Right. I mean, in these states, I know you talked about it in other episodes, but in regard to incentives and programs that have worked, and a lot of the times money is a factor to get folks vaccinated in these states where, culture and politics and, are gearing people away from getting vaccinated. Do you know if there's been any, in New Orleans for sure, there's some certain programs I've seen to get folks vaccinated, but it doesn't seem like that is an area that is as much of an issue for folks to get vaccinated as much as other parts of the states, just due to the nature of its population. But in order to meet that goal, we're a month away from getting that mark of 54%. What do you see as the main way to get folks vaccinated to meet that mark? Like what must be done?
I think, either just direct cash, or I think that you and I specialize in in communicating, difficult to communicate messaging, right? And what we see here is something that's difficult to communicate, or at least difficult for me to communicate, and that is where there was politics that got mixed with already pre-existing beliefs in groups of people who already are distrustful of the government because this is all that they've heard growing up, right? You know, don't trust the government, don't trust the government. This was a mantra that prior to Ronald Reagan was not something that existed. People love the government, you know, and so you have rural, mostly white individuals, mostly conservative individuals who are refusing to be vaccinated, and there's a convergence of politics and political beliefs. There's a convergence of economics to a certain degree. There's a convergence of education and where people are getting information. And when you put all that into a bowl and mix it up, what we end up getting are people who are just not going to get vaccinated. Like, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen, you know? And so I am of the mindset that all we can do is you could bring a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink, you know? So let's take those vaccines and move them to parts of the world that want them.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's so bizarre because as folks here are very skeptical and hesitant about getting vaccinated, other parts of the world are just praying for them. Desperate. You know, and I think it's more, it's not only just politics and culture that influence this, but also just our broken health system here in the U.S., which people don't know how to navigate, and is not.
Well, broken implies that it was repaired at one point.
Right, sure. It's a forever fractured health system. No, you're right. No, you're right. You're right, and you know, it's mistrust of politicians, it's mistrust of doctors, it's mistrust of science.
It's the conspiracy. You know, you have social media, you have conservative media that are constantly keeping people fear, anxiety. Don't trust the other side. And what we have is, did you see that documentary that was all over social media yesterday? It was like a 7-minute documentary. It was by a filmmaker who basically filmed his mom. It was a 7-minute documentary, and he called it QAnon. And it was basically, he just kind of documented his mom's descent into QAnon. And he bet her a bunch of money that, you know, and she's like, in 3 months, this, and this is going to happen. And $100 per event. 3 months later, he came with the camera. She had 7 $100 crisp bills. She paid to him. And then she's like, you know, in retrospect, those were kind of loony things to say. You know, and so it was funny how he made her pay, and that's probably how he paid for the movie, quite frankly.
Smart guy,
smart filmmaker, right? Hey, mom, I'm going to film you, and then let's make a bet. But it's called QAnon, and you know, it's, you know, he like was showing her that she was like super earthy. She was like, had all these Buddhas around the house, crystals. She was doing yoga in the morning, you know, into meditation. And like, it wasn't your typical, like, you know, whatever the typical mindset that you may think of, you know, like the Q shaman or whatever. QAnon shaman wasn't somebody like that. It was, you know, the sort of thing that it was just like the mom next door, you know, like that sort of stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting how, you know, so far on the left and so far on the right, if you go so far in one direction, you kind of end up on the other side. So, you know, and it's interesting for those demographics that you would, you know, that are in that makeup of like QAnon, you know, that they would both have these beliefs but come from radically different places. You know, somebody that is maybe in like, I don't know, anywhere in the world, because there's so many people that have this thought, or like in Humboldt, California, that are anti-vaxxers and distrustful and for other reasons. But yeah, it's really hard to convince those people of otherwise unless they, are emotionally impacted by something. And even still, I've heard stories of listening to podcasts of folks in communities in rural Tennessee that have been decimated by COVID, and folks are still hesitant to get the vaccine because of 5G, or it's against the religion base. It's
Bill Gates.
it came too fast. Yeah, Bill Gates. It's a conspiracy. All this stuff. Well, meanwhile, while their next door neighbor was taken out.
I think we need to I think this was your idea last night. It was in Dave that another animation we need is explaining how it didn't come fast at all.
Yeah, and I think that's an important message. That
I think that should be that should be high on the list of things that we work on.
Right.
Is showing, because it could be easily shown with the animation. For HPV it took 30 years or 10 years because it takes that long to develop cervical cancer, or for shingles or whatever. But we got COVID. It's like it's perfect animation. Like I'd see it in my head. Actually asked Lee if that's a problem. Should I call that animationitis? And she's like, yeah. When you start seeing animation in your head of things, she's like, you've been bit by the bug.
Yeah, I'm sure she's got it.
So I refer to it as animationitis. Lee is the person that we work with at Fable Vision. She's our primary, she's our writer, and she helps take the scripts that David and I write, and then she makes them cute.
Yeah, and Neil gets to another point, is that vaccine hesitancy has different forms to it, right? People have different reasons why they're fearful of getting vaccinated. And I think one of them is just that you hear over and over again is that it was developed so quickly. How can you have a vaccine that's ready within a year? That doesn't make sense. But this technology has been around for decades, and really, I think society, like biomedicine, has moved so much faster than just American society, or just not even just here in the US, but just people in general. We've kind of stayed at a certain level while science and technology has been accelerating way faster than we can comprehend. Like we can go to Mars. It's just that we are landing helicopters on Mars, but we can't get people vaccinated here. Is just shows the disparity between society and as a whole and technology. And so this technology of mRNA has been around for decades. And really, just as we're working with genetic coding and synthesizing a code for spike proteins with coronavirus, is that when you get that code for COVID-19, you're basically inputting it in research that's already been happening for years. And I think that message hasn't been articulated very well. And a lot of people don't know that. And they just, they just kind of think, okay, this is what the doctors say we should be taking. I guess everyone's taking it. I'm gonna take it. Or a lot of people say, everyone's taking this. That's too fast. But you need to understand why, and explain it in a way that compares to other vaccines and how mRNA vaccines work, which we did in the first video. But we need to do more.
Absolutely, 100% agree, obviously, and hopefully that will be a video that we can work on. And I really believe that. I think, I'm thinking like the next two need to be Dr. Corbet, and then also that, and they're both related.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Moving on real quickly because go ahead, David.
No. We can move on.
All right. So Britain has had one of the most successful COVID-19 responses, but what we're starting to see is we're starting to see a variant. So even though they had done so good and they were locked down, there's now a rise in COVID cases, the main cause, which appears to be the highly infectious virus known as the Delta. This is the that was first detected in India, and then Britain's recent moves to reopen society may play a role. The increase is a reminder that progress against the pandemic, even extreme progress, is not equal ultimate victory. That's so important in the U.S. It's very likely to show in other Western countries, and this is something that we've been talking about for a really, really long time. The idea of how the variants is going to be particularly problematic. We know about the Alpha variant. This was first detected in London. It's now referred to as the Alpha. Alpha's swift success has left scientists wondering how the variant conquered the world. A new study, which was posted online on Monday, has not been published, shows that Alpha disables the first line of immune defense in our bodies, giving the variant more time to multiply. And so I will dig into that data very, very quickly to find out what that's about. Lung cells with Alpha made drastically less interferon, which is a protein that stimulates the immune system. They also found that in Alpha cells that so these are cells that are infected with the Alpha variant. The defense genes normally switched on by interferon are quieter than in cells with other variants. So this is really it's scary because it's basically shutting down the immune system. As the United States edges closer to President Biden's goal of a 70% vaccination rate, many people are beginning to wonder how long their protection will last. And of course, nobody knows for sure what that is. So just something for us to think about. I'm going to just kind of blow through these really quickly. A bunch of data, things that I think that Doc Griggs will like. I'll present. But what I do want to do is I do want to just kind of quickly recognize that. And then David, I think actually let's. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you don't mind, I think your father, if I remember correctly, may have been at the beginning of the HIV epidemic as a physician at Cedars, right?
He was at Cedars, yeah. He was a pulmonologist.
He's a pulmonologist.
Yeah. So back in the early '80s, it was just chaos in understanding what was going on, especially for pulmonologists, where that's highly it's a central part of it too. So
was your father wasn't part of that initial New England Journal article describing HIV, right?
No, that he wasn't, but he was around doing he was around practicing during that time and was highly involved. Yeah,
of course. So let's just kind of tip our hats to that. 40 years ago, the first case of HIV was reported in the U.S., and this is the article that I was just referring to. On January 5th, 1981, on June 5th, sorry, a curious report appeared in the Center for Disease Control's Public Health Digest. 5 young gay men across Los Angeles had been diagnosed with an unusual lung infection known as pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, also called PCP, and 2 of them had died. And it was the first time that HIV and/or AIDS was first described. It is now, of course, claimed the lives of more than 32 million people globally. And here in the U.S., we have had, off the top of my head, I actually don't know how many people died of HIV in the U.S. But I just wanted to recognize that Saturday marked the 40th anniversary of the nation's first reported cases of HIV. More than 700,000 people, that's the number I was looking for, have died of the disease since then, and through medical advancements have drastically changed the prognosis for HIV. So I do want to kind of just recognize that that was a thing, and I do want to recognize the activists that drove the early response. Larry Kramer, of course, being one of the most people to be on the scene of what was called ACT UP. And I also did not plan for this to be the case, but I do want to give Dr. Roston, who is David Roston's father, his props, because He did not ask to go into and become an HIV doctor so early in his career, but was thrust in the middle of, in Los Angeles, a time where I was just coming up. And as I've mentioned to you guys before, my father was an optometrist in Los Angeles at the time. My dad was thrust into the middle of that because there was no testing for HIV for the first couple of years of the epidemic. And so one of the ways they could tell was an eye exam. And so my father had lines out the door. And of course, this was during a time when LGBT, the pride, laugh with me, LGBT was like, especially during the Reagan era. So people used to close their practices to people who were in the LGBT community. My father didn't, and he taught that level of compassion and empathy to me. And I'm certain the same thing happened in the Roston family as well, because that was what David's father was up against as well. So please, many props to your father.
Thanks. I'll make sure that he gets the message. I'm sure he'll be happy to hear that.
Yes. His work did not go unnoticed, I just want to say. All right, let's get to the numbers really quickly. I hate that we always rush through these numbers when it used to be that this was the main part of the show. We've changed. All right, 174 million cases. Wow. And globally, what we know of is 3,748,533. Of course, these numbers are gross inaccurate, or gross understatements, rather. Last night, we added 330,186, which is amazing. And deaths are 7,757. This is the first, well, I was going to make a point, but I realized it's not, actually it doesn't hold up. So as you can see here, the cases are really dropping globally dramatically, which is really, really quite impressive. It'll almost be the first time that we've seen some of these numbers since February, and then even before that in October. In terms of, so this is an old update. I was going to read this update here, but this is an old update. And then looking at deaths, we see that deaths are also fortunately declining. And then looking at what's happening globally in terms of hotspots, we really see South America. And I say this all the time, and I just want people to understand that this is really, really, really problematic. This to me, every time I see this, is very, very problematic for me, because what we're seeing here is a very, very well vaccinated South America. That's not what this is showing. What this is showing you is hotspots. So you can see here Argentina and Uruguay and Paraguay and Colombia and Costa Rica are the hottest spots in the world right now. And these are some of the best vaccinated countries, and I'll show you that right here. This is an older slide, but it's not this color here, but it's not too shabby. These are pretty well vaccinated. And when you see how well, and again, this is an older slide, last updated June 2nd. I wasn't going to present this slide, but you can see here that I wouldn't expect to see so much red here. And there's only one thing that would describe that, Dave, and that those are variants.
Yeah.
Those are variants. It's the only thing. That's
extremely frightening.
Yes, that's extremely frightening. So that is something that we definitely need to think about and keep on the top of our head. When you hear us say the pandemic's not 100% over, it's stuff like that we're looking at like this. This is the sort of stuff that we're concerned about. This is what scares me, and this is what right now, in terms of COVID, is keeping me up at night. These are all old slides. Here in the U.S., we're at 34,219,907 cases. Of course, this is gross underestimation, so is the number of deaths, 612,543. And let me just, people are texting. New cases, 8,123, and deaths, 164. Holy smokes, I haven't seen numbers this low in so long. Dude, look how low these cases are. I mean, this is almost like, look at this. This is insane. This is getting to like this level over here.
Yeah. I wonder though, and I wish we had more time, but fewer people are getting voluntarily tested. you know? So I wonder how that has
Well,
to do
here's
with it.
tests. Tests are going down,
Mm-hmm.
but we're also seeing decrease in hospitalization. So and then deaths.
Right,
Even though they're not
right.
lagging indicators, you know.
But that also, I mean, that also has to do with just that the response now, we know how to manage the virus once you're infected
Right.
much better than we did back in those early days. We were still
Right.
figuring it out.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, these are incredibly impressive. These are incredibly impressive numbers, quite frankly. And I think
it's amazing. Looking
yeah.
back, that's just like in half a year. That's insane at its pinnacle to now.
Yeah. I mean, think about that's where we were, 6 months ago, 5 months ago, that was the whole place was on. And then look at the rapid drop. I mean, there's no question. This was a function of vaccines, and continues to be, So, I can see why we are opening up again. I really can. Those are old slides. Let me jump. These are all old slides. So I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, University of New Mexico. Thank you, Dr. Michelle Andorio, who makes this possible, and would like to remind you all that COVID-19 and HIV have very similar origins. That's poverty. So looking at coronavirus cases, 473,777 in Louisiana, deaths 10,619. We have no data to report for the weekend, but you can see we've now reached this new plateau, and it's likely just to kind of hang here because we only have 32% of people are fully vaccinated, which is really, really sad.
Yeah, that's concerning.
I wish that we had more. You can see tests are kind of stable, hospitalizations are stable, and deaths are more or less kind of stable or plateaued rather. Maybe stable is not the best word to use. And when we look at Louisiana, we're at 7.1 per 100,000, more or less the same as it was last time we checked. Infection rate is, under 1, which is good. Test positivity is under 5. And then again, about 36% are fully vaccinated. And we are in the medium risk level. And looking at Orleans Parish, 4.9 per 100,000. Infection rate is well below 1. Test positivity is well below 5. And look at our vaccination rate, it's 50%, pretty much 50% here in the great city of New Orleans. So Dave, that's what I've got to present. We have about 1 or 2 minutes left here. Thank you for all of you guys that stuck with us for the entire show. Any parting thoughts, any considerations? Does Esmeralda want to jump on and say hi?
Yeah, she's over here.
All right.
Hold on.
I'm always a fan of when Esmeralda comes on to say hello.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, hello. Hi everyone. Just remember, shut up and take the shot, and protect yourself and others. If you want to take a shot with me, follow me on Instagram, Esmeralda the Puppet. All right, see you later.
Hey, Esmeralda,
Yeah.
Now that you're back in Hollywood, how's it been in Hollywood?
Oh, I love it out here. Everybody eats kale 24 hours a day, and everybody's so lovely out here. The sun, it's beautiful. The beach, it's hot. Anyways,
so are you.
Thank you, baby. You too. I love you. I miss you.
Miss you too. All right. Thank you, Esmeralda. Special appearance by Esmeralda. Thank you. David, we have to go. Thank you so much for appearing. And I'm sure we will be in touch about 100 times in the next 15 minutes. So.
Yes, absolutely. And anytime, I'd love to come back on.
All right.
It's fun. It's great talking about this.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys on Wednesday. Remember, health is a human right. Peace out.